Hi, welcome to the Frugal Frau. I'm Sukey, your host, and today we're going to show you how to make an inlay for a panel using simple hand tools. But before we get started, please like, subscribe, comment. It helps the channels out. And if you would like to ask questions, we encourage you to do so and place those in the comments, and we will do our best to answer every single one of them. So let's get started. Smooth and square off an appropriate sized piece of wood for your project. How contrasting a species you use is of course your choice. Next, use a marking gauge to mark the width you will need to fit into the area in which your inlay will be placed. Mark the opposite side too, as this will be helpful as you plane the piece to the appropriate width. Plane the inlay stock down to that width. Be careful not to plane past the line. Tom is starting this process with his small coffin scrub plane to get the bulk of the waste off. Turn your stock as necessary to get the other end off and to accommodate changes that may occur in the grain direction. You can use a chisel if necessary to get the very edge off and to get it close to the marked line. Now that most of the bulk has been removed, Tom has switched to his smoothing plane. In this project, we are using 8 pieces for the inlay. 4 are the length and width pieces, and then we have chosen to also make 4 square corner pieces with end grain up. You could, of course, choose not to put in corner pieces and instead miter the corners or butt the width pieces to the length pieces or vice versa. Tom has marked places where they need a little bit more planing off, and now he is proceeding to do that. Tom is marking a different wood species to make the 4 corner end grain up pieces. He marks this in 2 dimensions because he needs to cut the piece in 2 different dimensions in order to get a piece of wood that is approximate to the size of the corners. Here he is just making a pencil scribble along the edges that are part of the waste to be cut away so that he ensures he does not cut the wrong part. Tom is deepening the scribed lines with a knife, and then he cuts a starter notch for sawing, as you see right here. Use the rip saw of your choice to cut away the waste. After the first cut is made, flip around your stock and cut a notch to start this last little cut. Next, measure and mark where to cross-cut in order to cut the 4 corner pieces. These corner pieces, as well as the length and width pieces, are all deeper than the inlay channels. It is easier to do this as the excess can be easily removed during the final planing process of the panel, and this will result in an inlay that is perfectly flush with the panel surface. Tom is just marking the places to cut, and he's using a tri-square to do this because you might as well keep it square at this point, so that your squaring up at the very end is easier. These are cut with a small cross-cut saw. Here are the 4 corner pieces, and it doesn't matter that they aren't the same height. Remember, that part will be planed off even to be flush with the panel surface. The final fitting begins by installing the 4 end grain up corner pieces. Each corner is trimmed and individually fitted and then glued. Tom is choosing to use a small chisel to make the final cuts for this little corner, and you may choose to use a knife or another small chisel. Just be sure that your cuts from the top to the bottom are vertical and perpendicular to the surface. Once the piece fits to your satisfaction, glue it in and then proceed to do the same with the other 3 remaining corner pieces. Wipe off the excess glue for each of these corner pieces as you go, and that will just provide a better fit for the remaining longer pieces. After all 4 corner pieces are installed, scribe the length needed for each of the remaining pieces and cut them. Again, use your small bench tri-square to put squaring marks so that your cuts can be as square as possible. Enhance the scribe lines by cutting into that line from the waist side, and that will help your saw stay in place when you make this cross-cut cut. Test fit the piece, and if it does not need any planing for a tight fit, go ahead and just glue it in. Tom places the glue on the bottom of the channel and also the vertical sides of the channel. And that just ensures that this piece is going to be very securely in place. And he spreads the glue around with this little scrap piece of wood. Making sure he did put glue on the bottom of the channel, he just presses the piece into place. And here Tom is just placing in the final piece of inlay. And now he just taps all the pieces in just to make sure everything is secure and in place. After the glue has dried, it is time to pare down and smooth the inlay to the panel. Tom removes the majority of the waste with a chisel. The waste from the corner pieces was removed after the glue had dried, after they had been installed, and then he installed the longer pieces. It was just easier to do it this way. Once most of the waste has been removed, plane down the inlay pieces so that they are flush with the panel surface. Tom is just choosing to use his coffin scrub plane to get most of the smoothing done, and then he will switch to his smoothing plane to do the final smoothing, which will also include smoothing the final surface of the entire panel. Now that most of the waste has been planed off, Tom is doing the final smoothing by starting off with his smoothing plane and going in various directions to make sure everything is flush with everything else. And then the whole panel gets flattened too. So I'm not going to show all of this, but I think you get the idea now. The final flattening is accomplished by using the scraper blade, and that will get it little tiny little ditzels off and make it extremely smooth. It's a little handy tool to have. And then any planing necessary. It's just a matter of going back and forth between the plane and the scraper blade to do this final bit. Now, for the final bit, Tom is using an actual scraper blade in a plane. So it's a scraper plane. This is also a handy tool to have, and it's a lot less harder than using the plain scraper blade because your thumbs get really tired pressing that scraper blade down, and this prevents that fatigue in your thumbs. But he had to fiddle with this to get it adjusted so that it would work correctly. And note, it is not taking very much at all at this point. It just takes a little tiny bit off. If you want a really smooth surface, this is the step that you really should consider doing at the end. And especially if you want to be old school. Remember, sandpaper is sort of a modern invention, and the scraper blade was around long before sandpaper. The small top and bottom of this panel was easier to scrape with the scraper blade. So he went back to just using the scraper blade for this because he didn't want to cross over and scratch up the grain that goes in the opposite direction. Tom is now applying our standard 333 finish, which is 1/3 linseed oil, 1/3 paint thinner, and 1/3 spar varnish. We usually do multiple coats, and we actually do sand in between these coats until we get it as smooth as we want. Depending on the project, we sometimes take it all the way to 2,000 or 4,000 grit wet sanding. And then we buff it out so that it's not very shiny, but just has that hand-rubbed sheen to it.